Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. And we are continuing in Chapter 11 with Key Issue 2, which is why are situation and site factors important. I hope you're getting used to online instruction by now, hopefully, if not in the coming week or two. But don't forget to jot down some notes and send a picture to me. You guys are doing really well with that so far, so thank you for that. All right, so 2.1, situation and site factors. Just first of all, looking at why this is important to human geography and why we're studying it in this course is that geographers want to be able to explain why a company would choose to locate in one city instead of another. So why would it be more profitable to put an Amazon warehouse in Raleigh than it would be in Birmingham or whatnot? It doesn't have to be Amazon, it could be any company, but this is why this is important to this course, is that geographers want to be able to explain why a company would choose to put their business in one city or one rural area and not another one. And so if a company is looking at various places to put their facility, they will look at two key geographic costs. And the first one is situation factors. This one involves the transporting of materials to and from a factory. And so they want a location that will minimize the cost of transporting inputs, that is the materials, to the factory. And then they also want to minimize the cost of transporting the finished goods to the customers. Ideally, they would be close to the materials and their customers. That would be the most ideal situation. The second thing that they look at is site factors. This is the unique characteristics of the city itself or the rural area, wherever they're putting their company. This is the unique characteristics of the location that they're choosing. And so they would look at the labor. If we're using Amazon as an example, when they're looking at areas to put their business in, they have to first consider labor. Are there enough people in Raleigh to work at an Amazon warehouse? That is absolutely important. They would probably never put one in Red Oak or somewhere like that simply because they wouldn't have enough people to work in the factory. People would have to come from other areas to even work there. They also look at the capital. They look at the resources necessary to start their business there. And they look at land characteristics. Is there enough land to put an Amazon warehouse in Raleigh or wherever they're going to put one? And so in some industries, situation factors are more important than site factors. And in other cases, site factors are more important than situation factors, just depending on what is being sold. Manufacturers buy stuff from suppliers of materials. The supplies that they're buying could be minerals, it could be fabric, it could be energy, it could be machinery. It really could be anything that they need to buy in order to sell whatever they are selling. And so in that case, the optimal location would be close to inputs. You want to be close to your suppliers. You also have to consider that you have customers and you want to be close to your customers as well, especially if the cost of shipping the finished product is higher than the cost of shipping the supplies. All right, so mineral resources. When a company is deciding where to put their business, oftentimes, depending on what they're producing, they will look at the natural resources available to them in certain locations before deciding where to put their company. Earth has 92 natural resources, and sometimes they're combined, and that makes up about 3,000 different minerals that are used to make all kinds of products. Cars, machines, factories themselves, skyscrapers, and all of these have different qualities, different hardness, different color, different density. And so it's important, depending on what the factory is, to consider what mineral resources are available. Because, these are very important inputs for many industries. So minerals can either be non-metallic or metallic. That's pretty obvious. A non-metallic mineral would not contain metal, whereas a metallic mineral would contain metal. And so an example of a non-metallic mineral would be like gemstones or fertilizers, things that are extracted from the earth but do not contain metal. And then metallic minerals have metal in them, and typically they are used to build machinery or vehicles or many other things necessary for contemporary society. Within metallic minerals, they either contain iron or they don't. If they do contain iron, they're called a ferrous alloy. Iron is extracted from iron ore, and by far this is the world's most widely used ore. Important metals used to make ferrous alloys would be chromium, manganese, nickel, tin, titanium, tungsten, but these are ferrous alloys because they contain iron. And then a non-ferrous alloy, like I said, contains no iron. And so this would be like aluminum or copper or lead, magnesium, zinc, things like that. All right, so looking at proximity to inputs, and a good example of this is the copper industry. The copper industry is a bulk reducing industry. What that means is that the initial copper that you dig out of the earth is heavier than what you actually end up selling because it's boiled down to very little input. So you have like a big chunk of rock, you purify it, and it's smaller. So it's bulk reducing. It loses weight in the process of manufacturing. And so just looking through the steps of the copper industry and why this is a bulk reducing industry, first you mine copper. You have a heavy, bulky ore that is extracted from the copper mine, and most of it is waste. You might can hear my kids screaming in the background. The second step to this is concentration. So there are mills that grind the ore into tiny particles that produce copper. It is then smelted to remove even more impurities. It is then refined, and the purified copper produced by the smelters is treated at the refineries to produce copper cathodes. And by the time you get to that point, it's 99.99% pure copper. And then lastly, it is manufactured. And so it is turned into sheets or bullion. It is turned into a form that can be used in other products. And so this is a bulk reducing industry, and it is profitable for the mills and the smelters to be near the mines because that will minimize transportation costs because copper is so heavy when it is initially mined. All right, and this is a picture of a copper mine. So obviously if you take a chunk out of that, that does not look like copper. So this is a pair of copper dice. And so look, you go from that to that with the 5 steps involved that we just talked about. All right, so proximity to markets is very important for 3 types of industries. Bulk gaining industries, that would be when you create a product that is heavier after you're finished creating it. Copper is bulk reducing, it gets smaller and less heavy, but in some cases, products get more heavy, like Pepsi bottlers. They start out with a bottle, and then once you put the liquid in it, it's heavier. So that's a bulk gaining industry. Also, single market manufacturers. This is when you have a company that is basically selling to 1 or 2 customers. And then we talked about this in a previous chapter, but it is important for perishable products to be located near their customers because milk or cheese or whatever will go bad. So it needs to be close to the customer so that it can be shipped quickly. All right, so we will go through each of these individually, starting with bulk gaining industries. So a bulk gaining industry is exactly what it sounds like. It gains weight throughout production. We said copper was bulk reducing, meaning you start with a big chunk of rock, you boil it down to pure copper, and it's smaller than when you started. Bulk gaining industries are the opposite. You take several materials, you put them together, and then what you wind up with is heavier than what you started with. And so for bulk gaining industries, it is important to be located near the customer. because you will lower shipping costs if you are shipping only a short distance to your customers. Examples of bulk gaining industries would be like steel fabricators. So they would take steel and other metals and bend it, shape it, mold it. They take their separate parts and weld them, fasten them together with bolts and screws, and what you wind up with is heavier than what you started with. I used this example a second ago, but beverage bottlers is another example. You start out with an empty bottle, which is not very heavy at all. You fill it with 2 liters of liquid, and it is heavier than what you started with. So this map of the US is showing bulk gaining industry beverage production. And in order to stay relevant, our book has used beer production as their example of bulk gaining industry. But you can see here that the bottling is near the customer. And so bottling facilities are in large cities because that is where there are a lot of customers. Therefore, their shipping costs will be lower. Okay, so another type of manufacturer that would need to be close to their customers is a single market manufacturer. And this would be like a company that only has 1 or 2 types of customers. And so they need to be in close proximity to their 1 or 2 customers. An example of this would be like a button factory. They're not going to be selling to gas stations and grocery stores and things like that. They're going to be selling to cloth manufacturers. And so anything that is super specialized like that, zippers, clips, pins, anything that has one type of customer will want to be near that type of customer. Our book gives the example of the largest zipper manufacturer in the world, YKK. They have companies in 68 countries so that they can be close to their cloth producers who are buying their zippers. Another example of this would be car parts. The makers of parts for cars are specialized manufacturers that only have 1 or 2 customers. Part makers end up shipping most of their products directly to assembly plants. And so part makers are more likely to cluster near assembly plants because it's cheaper for them to pay shipping costs that way. So our last example is perishable product companies. And they make items that can go bad. And so they also need close proximity to the customer because their products will go bad if you have to ship them across the whole country. An example of this would be like the milk industry or bread or newspapers. Newspapers is that's an interesting example because it's not food that can go bad, it's information that goes bad. Newspaper publishers want to be near large populations so that people can have newspapers as soon as they come out. People demand that their newspaper be ready right after printing because the information, 1 or 2 days from now, it goes bad and people won't be able to buy it. All right, so motor vehicle production and sales. This is just a great example of a fabricated metal product that is a bulk gaining industry that is likely to be built near its market. Because it's a bulk gaining industry, it gets heavier after it's produced. The end product is heavier than what they start with. Just some statistics. Around 90 million cars are sold every year worldwide. China makes up about 27% of those sales. Other Asian countries are 22%. North America is only 2% of automobile sales worldwide. And Europe is 17%. Interestingly, though, even though North America only makes up 2% of the automobile industry, about 80% of the cars in North America are actually produced here. So for the most part, we are buying cars that are produced here, even though worldwide we only make up 2% of the automobile industry. All right, so 2.3 looks at an industry that has recently changed. So steel mills in the U.S. changed location based on changing sources of raw materials. So in the past, steel was located near iron and coal ores because that is what was used to make steel. Now they are making it from scrap metal. which is basically recycled metal. And so instead of having just a couple of steel mills that are located near iron and coal, they have a bunch of steel mini mills that are located near scrap metal. And scrap metal is widely available. So this is something where they can be located near their main input, which is the scrap metal, but also near their customer. And so this is actually a cheaper way to produce steel. All right, so worldwide production has shifted to developing countries, especially China. This is an interesting trend. In 1980, 81% of steel was produced in developed countries and only 19% in developing countries. Now, this has flip-flopped considerably, and 27% is produced in developed countries, while 73% is produced in developing countries. This has grown a whole lot in China simply because they have access to lots of iron and coal. All right, that's all for today. Have a great day. Send me a picture of your notes.